you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Snap Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College, Dabigo Road. GMS Snap Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.
Hello and welcome to Second Take with IDK. A beautiful day, a beautiful week. The week World Cup 2026 is beginning, the FIFA World Cup, and we are glad you have been able to join us. My name is Meboke Birungi, and this is
Ismail Dakaba Chigongo IDK.
IDK, yeah, we have lots of opinions here. So please share, give us comments and subscribe. We have here Mbazira who wants to know, Mebo, which team am I? They want to know the team I'm supporting in the World Cup. And do you know the team I'm supporting?
No, I don't.
Isma, I've shared it with you before.
You said DRC last week. I don't know whether you're still the same.
Okay, in Africa, yes, DRC, but my team is actually England. Yeah, I support England. We're bringing it home. We've been singing that song since 1966.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my team. If you have any other questions, let me know. Isma, we are here today to talk about the 10 African countries. I don't know if you want me to run through them, but for those who are wondering, 10, I'm actually happy that we have 10 African countries, but I'm wondering, are some of these countries like bridesmaids, you know, just going through escorting the big guns? We have Algeria, Cape Verde, as you taught me to pronounce, DRC, Egypt, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Morocco, Senegal, South Africa, and Tunisia. So maybe we can start with Ghana, that we're not happy with the poor results in the international friendlies, that they saw it fit to sack their coach.
Yeah, a few weeks before the World Cup came around, Ghana decided to change their coach and sacked Otto Addo. Or Ato Odo. I always confuse which one, whether the A or the O comes on the other side. And they decided to replace him with a veteran, Carlos Queiroz, who many people remember from his time as being an assistant at Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson, and eventually also serving as a coach at Real Madrid. He's also coached and taken Iran to the World Cup before. He's 73, so in terms of experience, he has it in plenty. My bigger issue with Ghana has nothing to do with the coach, because Queiroz may have all the tools to make them succeed, and of course he has some players. When you think about Antoine Semenyo, Thomas Partey, and a few others, you think they have some quality in that squad, even if they failed to qualify for the AFCON, but consequently qualified for the World Cup. Missing Mohamed Kudus is going to be a huge factor, I think. He set a very lofty target. He set a round of 16 appearance as the bare minimum. He has a very short contract, Carlos Queiroz, in that job. And his contract, the extension of his contract, is dependent on how far Ghana will go in the tournament. If they do well, they'll extend. His contract actually runs out the day after Ghana knocked out of the World Cup, or the day after they win the World Cup. The memory of many of us, I think, of Ghana at this tournament, and they first qualified for the World Cup in 2006. When they did beat Uganda by 2-0 in Kumasi to qualify for their first World Cup back in 2006. When they went to that first edition, I don't think many of us have a recollection of how they performed in Germany back then, but all of us have a recollection of how well they performed in South Africa in 2010, eventually knocked out in a penalty shootout by Uruguay. The game that is famous for the Luis Suarez handball.
I remember that.
Very late in the game, for which he was sent off, and then Samoa Gyan missed his penalty. And then they went into a shootout where John Mensah, famously known as the Rock of Gibraltar, missed his kick in the shootout, and Ghana were knocked out. I think the challenge for them is to match that, to get to another quarterfinal, which will be quite a stretch, especially when you're missing one of your best players in Mohamed Kudus. I also sometimes fear for where the goals for Ghana are going to come from, especially considering that their centre forwards, Jordan Ayew in particular, have not been in very good nick. These days, I think Jordan Ayew, I watched one of their games recently and he was wearing the armband. I hope he is the captain, but their best chance of goals for me is going to come out of Antoine Semenyo. If Semenyo blooms, then Ghana could actually compete in their group. I also would love to look at the group where they are placed, because unlike for so many of the teams we discussed in the last edition, it may not matter where they are placed. The teams that we discussed last week, Germany, England, France, Brazil, Argentina, Spain, the expectations on them are so lofty that you don't even look at who they are playing.
They're in Group L with my team, England, Croatia and Panama.
Yeah, they have a very difficult group, I think, of all the African teams, and maybe we'll do that for all the other African teams to see where they are placed. I think Ghana have the tough of the groups. There will be overwhelming underdogs against Croatia and England. Of course, Croatia, like we all know, reached the semi-finals in 1998 and played the final in 2018 in Russia. So a very big profile. England needs no introduction to anyone watching this show. So they've got to, first of all, get the 3 points against Panama. If they have any designs on making to the latter stages, consider that in some groups, not only the top two will go through, but also some third place teams will advance to the next round of the competition. So it's mightily important that Ghana get a positive result against Panama.
Before we go to the other countries, I saw this statistic, and Quiros is I don't want to say an outlier, that's a bit an exaggeration, but 8 out of 10 African countries have local coaches. What does that tell you?
It tells you a bit about the deliberate approach by many African federations to groom coaches, and the manner in which they are grooming them is when they bring in a foreign coach from Europe, and it's been a debate eternally across Africa. The late Stephen Keshi did light a fire many years ago when he claimed African federations are hiring nobodies from Europe to come and coach here. But I think one of the things that has happened over the past 20 years is that many African teams have assistant coaches who are African, and the plan is always to help them grow, that in case the so-called foreign European coach leaves, then they can step into that role. And many have stepped into that role. However, I've seen with so many of the coaches that have come out of Europe, let's give an example of the former Senegalese coach, Aliou Cissé. He also brought in his assistants who had been his coaches in his time in France. So it's not enough just the head. And I've always been one of those who has argued vehemently that no African country, and I repeat that, no African country has the capacity to develop a player to their full potential. We do not have the facilities, we do not have the technology, we do not have the technical expertise. So it's a patriotic thing out of the heart. It's driven by a lot of emotion, yeah, but not with a lot of research that
what if
the
African player goes to those football academies in Europe?
That's the only way they can reach their full potential. Because no African can, not even Morocco, which I've visited, that have an exceptional structure. Not even they have the capacity to develop a player to their full potential.
Okay, let's go to Group J, which has Algeria, Argentina, Austria, and Jordan.
Algeria have always been a letdown in these tournaments. They go through a qualifying campaign, go and beat everyone, and we are all thinking, where will Algeria eventually end up? However, I think they arrive in North America with a bit of their tails between their legs, because one, they are only returning to the World Cup. They were not there in Qatar.
In Qatar, no.
So they missed that edition. And that was what people would argue would have been some sort of golden generation because Riyad Mahrez was at the peak of his powers. Now he's older, he's the captain of the team. Even when we watch him at the AFCON in Morocco, I don't remember the game where he played the entire 90 minutes. It's largely an aging squad for the Algerians. I don't think I have any expectations of him. I think for them over the past few editions of the World Cup, it's always been about getting there. That's why they're going to a qualifying campaign across Africa and win all their games and then get to the tournament and don't win any game of football. So
yeah.
I do not have any heightened expectations of the Algerians. Anything they do, for me, will be a bonus for the continent. So maybe you look at that group and think they could get a result of Jordan, which would be one of the whipping boys of the tournament. You don't expect them to get a result against Argentina. However, if you go back to the 2022 World Cup, Argentina lost their opening game
to Saudi Arabia.
But eventually recovered from that and went on to win the tournament. And the other champions who have lost the opening game, so did Spain in 2010. They lost their tournament opener to Chile, but still recovered from that and went all the way to win the tournament. So maybe Algeria going to one game where they are very cagey, put numbers behind the ball, and it's very possible to hit Argentina on the break. Yeah, you get a goal, then win that 1-0, then you can start to raise the bar for yourself.
Okay, sorry to take you back, but I had a question about Ghana. You're talking about the qualification here of Algeria. Were you a bit surprised that Ghana managed to qualify?
No, I wasn't.
Considering their poor form in Africa?
Unfortunately or fortunately, the qualifiers for the AFCON and the World Cup were happening alongside each other, yeah, simultaneously. So they were not getting results in one and getting results in the other. I don't think it's an extreme occurrence. It's I think it's just sport.
It was just hard luck.
Yeah, just hard luck. They struggled in one and were getting results in the other.
Okay.
And maybe it says a lot about sometimes the motivation. Ghana is one of those countries that benefit a lot from their diaspora community.
Because they didn't
and
even
some of their
make
players
it.
in the players in Europe, and their motivation would be higher qualifying for the World Cup and not for the AFCON.
African. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a small fish, which is actually a small country, Cape Verde.
Yeah.
They are against Saudi Arabia that beat Argentina, as you've said, Uruguay and Spain. Any point there?
There was a huge pattern prior when Cape Verde qualified for the World Cup for the very first time. I actually did write a story for the Daily Monitor in the aftermath of their qualification for their first World Cup. And the title of that story was The Age-Old Diaspora Question. No country in this tournament has benefited as much from their diaspora community like Cape Verde. There would never been a situation where they'll be qualifying for the World Cup. Just to go back, 13 years ago they were playing only their first AFCON tournament. That was in 2013. And ever since then they've invested heavily in attracting their diaspora community to come back and make a contribution. And sport has been a huge beneficiary of that community. But they are one of the smallest nations to qualify for the World Cup. It's a collection of islands. Comparable only to Curacao or Curacao. I've had so many pronunciations of Curacao from all kinds of forums. I chose to stick to mine, the one I would pick. So I think Cape Verde are also in that in the same bracket of teams that are just going to go and enjoy the tournament. I don't expect them to do much, but for them, they've broken a glass ceiling that makes it possible for so many to believe that they can make it to the World Cup. And it's just supposed to be a celebration that this beautiful country of multiple islands is going to be there. And if you watch them in the tournaments they played at the AFCON over the past 13 years, and I think they've qualified for 3 or 4 in the past decade, they bring a lot of color to the stands. Yeah, there's a lot of color to the stands when Cape Verde are playing. So should be enjoyable. They have so many players who have been born and bred in Portugal. Most of them play lower division football in Portugal. So the culture would not be very different from what the Portuguese team play. But beyond that, not much of an
Okay.
expectation on them.
Okay, Group A, South Africa versus Mexico, South Korea, and the Czech Republic.
South Africa thrown into the opener like they were in 2010. This is a repeat of the opening game of the World Cup in 2010 because they play on Thursday at 10 p.m. For everything that South Africa believe they are, it's actually a good thing that now they've qualified for the World Cup, because ever since they hosted the World Cup, they've struggled to get back to the World Cup in a qualification campaign, to the extent that there are tournaments where they failed to qualify because of some transgressions in qualifying, where they've been docked points. Even in this one, they were docked points. Remember, they had a player, I think, Tebogo Mokoena. Their shirt number 4, he should be their best player currently. Plays for Mamelodi Sundowns alongside Dennis Onyango. During the qualifiers, he received multiple yellow cards across games, and they played him in a game when he was supposed to be suspended. And they dropped points in that, but eventually it didn't affect their qualifying campaign. Eventually, Hugo Bruce and his team had done enough to make it to Mexico, USA, and Canada. It's a team of players that know each other very well. Maybe that could be an advantage, because you could almost argue 99% of the South African players play in their local league. Yeah, in the PSL, the Premier Soccer League. So there's a lot of familiarity with the team and the culture of a side, but they've got to start by putting their hand up on that opening game at the Stadio Azteca, because if they don't, then it's going to slide very, very quickly. For everything that South Africa are, I think sometimes they do overrate themselves. I've seen a lot of criticism online of their striker, Lyle Foster, who plays at Burnley. Most of the time when he's been part of a side, he's been able to convert and get them goals. But South African football does not see him as a solution for the goals. Of course, when you've had Sean Bartlett play at the lofty heights of Charlton and Benny McCarthy and Siabonga Nomvete, those guys who are played right at the top, in the top leagues in Europe, they look at Lyle Foster as a downgrade. And it could as well be. But so many things about South African football that are very good. There are not many players who have emerged from that league and performed anywhere outside of the lake, yeah, because South Africa sometimes behave like fish in a lake, that take them out of that. Indeed. And it will die, yeah. So even they, not very lofty expectations for me of where South Africa will end up.
Okay, Morocco, they are with Brazil, Haiti, and a country of your interest now, Scotland.
Yeah, if you remove Haiti from that group and put Norway, it will be the same group that Morocco were part of in 1998. In that tournament where Morocco actually had a very good opportunity of advancing from the group stages. In their final game, I remember they beat Scotland, and Norway beat Brazil, and Norway went through at the expense of the Moroccans. Morocco have benefited greatly from investing in their game.
Yeah.
And all of us have not forgotten how well they performed in Qatar and made that semi-final, especially that quarter-final where they knocked out Portugal by the lone goal after and later on they had a man sent off. Now, after you've broken that glass ceiling and shown the world that you can make it to the semi-final, the expectations on Morocco are much higher than they've ever been. Even if in this phase they have not converted some of their very good football into a trophy. Would have been very good if they were going to the World Cup having won the AFCON on the pitch, which they failed to do, and they've been handed that trophy by the CAF Exco Appeals Committee. But not many of us think they actually won, because we saw Senegal win the trophy on the pitch. They've been also on a very long unbeaten streak in international football. I think they went anywhere above 20 games. Someone can look up those stats for a very long time. And that record, I think, had been held by Spain. So the team that have been in the zone, they've changed coaches. Walid Regragui, who took them to that semi-final in Qatar, is gone. He also got them to the AFCON final earlier this year. He's left the job, and I think they have another Moroccan who has been part of a setup. He's the one who is going to be in charge of the team. At the World Cup, they have some quality in that side. All of us have seen what Brahim Diaz has done at Real Madrid, and a few of the other players. Ashraf Hakimi is arguably the best right back in the world. He falls into an argument of the best 3 to 5 right backs. So there is quality in that side. They've also had to change their central defensive partnership. Remember, they were struggling with playing there Naif Agua and Romain Saiz. Now Saiz has suffered a lot of injuries, missed most of the games at the AFCON, but they managed to lure Issa Diop, the Fulham defender, to take up the citizenship with Morocco. Issa Diop's father is Senegalese and his mother is Moroccan. And I remember when he chose to change allegiance and play for Morocco, there was a huge celebration in Morocco because it was in the middle of that fight between Senegal and Morocco about who won the AFCON and who is the best African team. So I think it brings a bit of quality and a lot of balance. They've had to play 2 left-footed players at centre-back. Now you have a right-footed player in Issa Diop to partner Naif Agua, who is left-footed. So I think that's a first building block.
Yeah.
Then you have the 2 Amrabats in the middle. Then you have Onahi, who has been very good. But they've chosen against taking Yusuf El Nesri, who was one of their best players at the AFCON in 2022. In Qatar, he's not part of the 26-man squad. So I have a feeling they might regret it because of his experience. Besides Brahim Diaz, I do not see where the goals are going to come from in that. But they've got to look at the Haiti game as a must win.
As a must win.
Yeah, you get those 3 points, then you start to think of whether they can beat Scotland, because Brazil will always be a tough cookie, regardless of what Brazil side show up.
Yeah.
Regardless of what Brazil team show up, you think it's very difficult for any team in world football to beat Brazil. Of course, except if you're Germany, who beat them by 7 goals to 1. Yeah, but I'm fairly confident that Morocco have enough in them to make it out of the group stages.
Okay.
They have a lot of lessons to lean on.
Okay, let's talk about Group E, which has Ivory Coast, Germany, Krakow, and Ecuador.
Wow. The Ivorians have altered their setup to play a lot more on the front foot than they ever did. This is a team that the last time we followed them keenly was during that AFCON, which they won, where they had to sack a coach during the tournament and hired Emancify. And he's still in the job. Emancify, who came in midway through the tournament and led them to the AFCON, is still part of this. He's still the coach there. What they've done with that team, and recently they beat France by 2 goals to 1. I'm one of those who does not value friendly results. I think they can give you a fair measure of confidence, but nothing more than that. When the real tournament starts, you have to play a lot more different. And the team you beat, which is higher ranked, will also play at a higher level than they did in a friendly game. One of the things Fire has done is that Ivory Coast now play a lot more on the front foot than they ever did. The game is built around the RB Leipzig teenager, who is 19, Diomande, and Amad Diallo, who plays at Manchester United. And that's how they play. Then you have Frank Kessie pressing high up the pitch. I don't know whether they can go into the tournament and play that way entirely, or they need to vary their game a bit, depending on the situation and the result they are seeking. But they seem hell-bent on insisting that they are going to play on the front foot for the entirety of the tournament. It's a game of risk and reward. I'm one of those who is very circumspect, but I'm a bit patient. I'm a bit patient. So maybe that's what is going to get them the results they desire at this World Cup. And that group, like I stated, of Haiti, you've got to target Krakow. However, Krakow have a lot of players with Dutch heritage. Yeah, there's a lot of them. It used to be a Dutch territory. I don't know whether it still is. For the guys who follow their politics would know. I follow it as much, but I don't remember they have now really independence. The way
It's
it's
like
called.
Greenland.
Yeah, the independence, the way it's tagged on people. But they've got to get a result against Curacao to
Okay,
start with.
Group G, which has Egypt. I'm thinking Iran is there. I don't know if the world will be supporting Iran. Belgium and New Zealand.
A lot of chaos around the Iranian team. I want to put it before we get to Egypt. Their team was supposed to travel and have their pre-tournament camp in the USA. When they were denied visas, a group of players, some of the staff, not necessarily the players, Iran requested Mexico to host their training camp, and Mexico accepted. Then, in addition to traveling with the entire contingent of the team, because when you're going for the World Cup, there's 26 players and perhaps another 34 officials, over 60 people who are part of that group. They decided to go and have their camp in Mexico. Mexico had actually offered to host all the games involving Iran because Donald Trump had threatened not to give them visas. But now even where they are in Mexico, up to 15 officials, including the FA president and the FA vice president, will not be allowed to come into the USA because the USA claims they are part of the Revolutionary Guard, who USA regard as a terrorist group.
Yeah.
And there's also several officials, the support staff of that team, about 13 of them, who will also not be allowed to enter the US. So they are going to be training in Mexico and then travel to the US to play their games. But let's get back to the African story. The African story here is about Egypt. Egypt is currently coached by Egypt is currently coached by Hassan Hossam. He's the one who scored the goal that got him to the World Cup back in 1990. And between 1990 and 2018, Egypt did not qualify for another World Cup until Mohamed Salah came along. That's how long it took. It took him 28 years to return to that tournament. So the combination of the man who took him to the World Cup in 1990 and the one who brought them back to the World Cup in 2018 is what Egypt are leaning on. And remember, Egypt was the first team, the first African country to ever play at the World Cup, and should have been in 1934, if I remember correctly. And I've seen the guy who scored their goals at the World Cup, I think is immortalized in a statue in Cairo. For everything that Hassan Hossam wants to do, I think Mohamed Salah has to play well. He hasn't had a great season at Liverpool. Was okay at the AFCON in Morocco. But I think everything that they will do well goes through him. Even if they have a bit of quality, you could think of Omar Mamouche, at City. Doesn't get a lot of minutes, comes off the bench routinely, but that's where I think their football is. The one thing you're guaranteed with Egypt and some of these Arab sides is they are very organized without the ball. When they have to stay in positions just to ensure they're not going to give away a lot of spaces, that the Egyptians will do. But their tournament is going to depend on what they do in the other half of the pitch. A Belgian side that is in decline, you could say, because the golden generation is gone. Kevin De Bruyne, while still in the side, Lukaku and a few others. I think
Lukaku has had a troubled season.
A troubled season at Napoli, suspended, went away, came back injured. He's had a lot of trouble in his own docket to deal with. But also, as they are declining, they are also in transition. I think the team is going to be handed over to Jeremy Doku. And he's had a brilliant season at Man City. Most of the attacking impetus is going to go through that direction. But that may not be the game that decides where Egypt end up. You can feast on Iran because Iran have had their troubles. So you've got to pick on the positives around Iran's problems and use them as Egyptians, and then you can get some positive results to ensure that you make it out of the group stage. Because it will also be quite a shame for a 48-team World Cup that has a round of 32 after the group stages, that some of these big African countries, and the Egyptian king included, Mohamed Salah, that they cannot lift a team into the round of 32 at the very minimum.
Okay. DR Congo, Portugal, Uzbekistan and Colombia, and this is their first World Cup since 1974 when they were known as Zaire. And they will not be with Patrice Lumumba. He's actually called Michael something.
Yeah.
I have his name somewhere. But yeah, what are their chances? Uzbekistan.
In my lifetime, I watch a lot of football, and the World Cup in particular. I remember I had a Ladybird book in 1994. I was very young, but I had a book where I would write lineups and all these kind of things around the World Cup. But I've never seen Uzbekistan play football. Actually, my only story about Uzbekistan is that many years ago, one of the greatest number 10s signed a contract with the richest team in Uzbekistan. The team is called Bunyodko, yeah, and that was Rivaldo. My first time to hear of Uzbekistan as a football playing nation was when Rivaldo signed for them. And then eventually, when he signed for Bunyodko, then you have to watch and follow their results in the Asian Champions League. So they don't have a very huge profile. And DRC themselves may not have a very huge profile in the World Cup. Like you've mentioned, they last qualified as Zaire back in 1974. Thanks to the passion of the kleptocratic, yeah? That's the word, yeah?
Kleptocracy.
Yeah, the word from kleptocracy. Struggle with that. Under Mobutu Sese Seko, his passion for sport, the kind that brought the Rambo in the jungle, that fight between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali, is the one who invested the kind of money that got DRC to the World Cup in 74. Ever since then, they haven't. But they haven't qualified now because they have a dictator in charge of their country. They've had so many people who have moved to the diaspora that haven't come back. Start with their captain, Chasel Mbemba. Didn't perform too well when he was in England with Newcastle, but I think his career has gone up ever since he walked out of England in the French Liga, and he's been very, very good. Then you have to think about Cedric Bakambu. These days comes off a bench. Then you have Johan Visa, the Newcastle striker, born largely in Europe, but came back to play for the DRC, and then they go and hire a very, very good coach. The overrated Sebastian Dosabri, who coached Uganda at the 2019 AFCON, and actually took Uganda to the round of 16 in that tournament before losing to Senegal. So he's put together a fairly decent side. But sometimes I think we need to be able to manage our expectations. When you haven't qualified for the World Cup since 1974, I think just getting back to this stage and then ensuring that you are at the next edition has got to be the bare minimum I think Dosabri is looking at. He gets a chance to coach at a platform as huge as this. And remember, DRC are the ones who took a 10th slot.
Yeah.
So they are the poorest of the 10 African countries. Remember, they were knocked out in the qualifiers by Senegal. They had led for the entirety of the qualifying campaign before match day 5 in Kinshasa, where DRC needed to draw to ensure that they qualified for the World Cup. And they led that game by 2-0 before Senegal came back and won the game by 3-2. So maybe that emphasizes where the Congo are at this stage. But they are back in the tournament. I've always thought that when you look at tournament football, you've got to target and say which result can we fight for the most. Yeah, you must stick off that this is a must win. You're going to a game against Portugal and you're thinking, if we get a result, it will be a bonus. It will be very positive. But there are games that you know you must win. Yeah, and that's how DRC have got to look at that group for all the other teams that are not Portugal.
Okay. Tunisia is with Netherlands, Japan, and Sweden.
Recently, Algeria beat the Dutch by 1-0 in the Dutch farewell game before they traveled to North America for the World Cup. And the reason why the Dutch played against the Algerians was for them to get a feel of
Europe,
of an Arab side, a North African side, because now they have Tunisia in that group. Tunisia, I think, historically, have been the biggest letdown of African teams at the World Cup. They qualify with a stellar record almost all the time, unblemished.
Yeah.
Then when they turn up for the tournament, they are barely competitive. At the last World Cup, they beat France by 1-0 in the third group game, but it was irrelevant because France had made it through and Tunisia had been knocked out at that stage. So I don't know how much of an expectation I can have of Tunisia, because every time I've looked out for them at the World Cup, they've just showed up and played their 270 minutes and gone home. So
every once in a while they'll go to the next stage, but
no, not even the next stage. They get knocked out at the group stages.
But they've
every time.
What about 2016 or 2018?
They never get anywhere. Tunisia, no. They never get anywhere. So sometimes you look at them, and that group for me is also very difficult. There's the supercomputer that is tipping Netherlands to win the World Cup. And that supercomputer picked the last two winners of the World Cup, including France and Argentina. But that supercomputer should have consulted me. I knew Argentina would win the World Cup 2 years prior. Everyone who has listened to me on KFM, I remember the moment we competed in the last two Copa Americas before that World Cup in Qatar, and won the Copa America before the World Cup. I went on a year-long narration that Argentina would win the World Cup. So maybe I should also be inserted into the supercomputer. At least I got one right, and very long before it happened.
So who is winning this one?
I don't know yet. Let's continue.
But briefly talk about, you mentioned Netherlands, and we've talked one one dark horse before in...
Are we done with all the African teams?
No. Okay, maybe we'll come
back
to
Netherlands
later.
Okay,
finally what they're calling the group of death, which is Group I, which has, I don't even know, maybe it's that computer that is bringing this as group of death. But Norway, Iraq, Senegal and France. Would this be your group of death?
Yes.
Really?
There is a whipping boy there in Iraq who are also former Asian Cup champions not too long ago. There is France, who are the team of the moment. Have played the last two World Cup finals.
Yes.
Have the biggest talent pool, I think, currently in world football. There is Norway, who have been the most impressive side, I think, in the European qualifiers for the World Cup. They score goals in a glut. You think of Erling Haaland, Young Strand Larsen, Alexander Soloth at Atletico Madrid. And if you watch the manner in which Norway beat Italy during the qualifiers, you would be very scared. Yes, Italy have not been very good in the recent past, but even when you're not very good, you need to be put in your place. And Norway put them in their place. Everyone knows Norway will compete. Actually, Norway will be very disappointed if they don't make it out of the group stages. So will Senegal, for the matter of this conversation. Senegal, African champions. We saw them on the pitch win. Forget what the boardroom says. Senegal think they should be the best African side.
Yeah.
And they've been for some time because they've won a CHAN, they've won under 17, under 20 AFCON, they've won an AFCON. They have a fairly, their second golden generation after 25 plus years. Ever since that era of the El Hadji Diofs and Salif Diao and Papa Bouba Diop and the others, the one that beat France in the opening game of the 2002 World Cup and eventually went to the quarterfinal where they lost to Turkey via the golden goal deep into added time. They have ingredients in this team. When you think about Papa Gueye, who scored the goal that won them the World Cup and the kind of progress he's made at Villarreal, when you think about Lamine Camara at Monaco, and he's been linked heavily with some big boys including Liverpool. You think about Nicholas Jackson at Bayern Munich. He may not be doing very well at Bayern, but I think for the Senegalese side he has the quality to bang in some goals, even if he doesn't start many of the games. You think about Ibrahim Mbaye, the teenager at PSG, taunted to be one of the best 10 teenagers in world football currently. Then, of course, there's Sadio Mane, the superstar of the side. Then even when you go further back, there's Idrissa Gana Gueye, you have Kalidou Koulibaly, who is struggling to be fit for the first game. Then you have Keprin Diata at the right back. And then Eduardo Mendy in goal. I think across the pitch is a lot of quality, and then they can also hinge on their physicality in there. And like all the other teams that I mentioned earlier, they need to get a result over Iraq, and then hopefully they can pick a point off either Norway or France, and then they will be into the next round. But yes, the group of death, indeed the group of death for me.
Okay, let's go to some of the other dark horses, the European teams. Portugal, where they, what are their chances? We have CR7, we have their strong midfield with Bruno. But also, I think I heard the coach talk about Diogo Jota, that they are playing for him, in memory of him.
Yeah, it can be a driving force. Sometimes when people have a purpose that is greater than themselves,
yeah,
they do things that are unimaginable. Someone will even argue Liverpool should have used that, but I think they spent most of the season mourning. And sometimes when you digest the problems of this Liverpool side, I think losing Diogo Jota hit the team very, very hard. It will have hit the Portuguese team equally as hard. They've had a longer period, I think, to mourn and give him a fitting send-off. Now, what bigger send-off would it be than helping Cristiano Ronaldo win his first World Cup? He's playing in his 6th. This is he's the second oldest player at the World Cup, behind the Scottish goalkeeper, Craig Gordon, who is 43, and Ronaldo is 41. They have a very good team. Let me take that back. They are very good players. Very good players. And historically, Portugal have always had very good players. Even if you go back to the era when they had Luis Figo, Rui Costa, Sergio Conceição, whose son is actually on the team, Francisco Conceição, Paulo Bento, Vita Baia. They've had all these, Fernando Couto, even if you bring in Ricardo Carvalho. And when Ronaldo first came into the side back in 2006 in Germany, they've always had very good players. Very, very good players. The closest they've had to having a team was 2006. When Ronaldo was playing his first World Cup, they got to the semi-final and lost marginally, should be to France, and eventually went into a third-place playoff game against Germany. The challenge Roberto Martinez faces now, their coach, is to mold all these beautiful attributes of this team into a team. These players must become a team. That's something none of us has realized. Because you look at, let's say, just a centre-back pairing. Let's say it's Ruben Diaz and Ignacio in that position. You have arguably the best left-back in the world in the recent past, Nuno Mendes. You have Diogo Dalot or Semedo playing at right-back. Then you have probably the best midfield in the world. You have Vitinha, João Neves, and Bruno Fernandes, like you mentioned earlier. Then you have a front line of a player who could be the greatest scorer that we've watched in our lifetime as he continues his pursuit to 1,000 goals, Cristiano Ronaldo. Then you have a lot of support in Francisco Conceição off the right. You have Rafael Leao on the left. You have all these options across the team. But the individual ability is so good, but none of us has ever seen a Portuguese team. Now, that's what Roberto Martinez has to work on. And there are people, and I was seeing an article over the weekend, whether Ronaldo is a strength or weakness of the team, because they cannot take him off. When they tried to do it in Qatar and played Goncalo Ramos after his hat-trick, the team looked actually worse without him. And sometimes when he's playing, the contributions are very minimal because he no longer has the legs. So he has to play in and around the 18-yard box. So it's always a very difficult balancing act, for whoever is in charge. And it won't be any different for Martinez in North America for this particular edition of the World Cup. Very good players. I wait to see whether they have a team.
What about Netherlands? They have a strong defense with Nathan Ake and Virgil van Dijk, and their coach has been around for a very long time, but he hasn't gotten. I mean, he has reached, I think, a semi-final. And
when you've been around for a very long time, Ronald Koeman has,
Yeah.
you've got to take out his spell at Everton. It was very terrible. Yeah, by the time they sacked him, no one wanted to remember what his name was because he had been very poor during his time. The supercomputer says Netherlands will win the World Cup. And that will sound like music to so many Dutch fans that I know, including my campus roommate, Davis Imbuga. They've been runners-up thrice in the World Cup. And some people who lived through that era think they should have won the 1978 World Cup. Had Marco...
They've never won it, isn't it?
Yeah, they've never. They've been runners-up thrice. When you want to describe nearly men, eternal underachievers, if you misspell any of those words, they'll read Netherlands national football team. Like I was saying, they should have won the 1978 World Cup had Johan Cruyff chosen to go to Argentina. Because he had also become an activist who was involved in the politics. He chose not to go to Argentina because Argentina was under dictatorship. And he thought the human rights abuses that were happening at the time did not sit well with him to go and play at a World Cup where a dictator was going to get all the credit for organizing a good one. So they chose not to go there. And they failed to win that. I think they were knocked out in the semi-finals. That's how strong they were. Then they've had all these great Dutch sides. The Frank Rijkaards, the Ruud Gullits, the ones who reached the Euros in '92. The ones that who played in the semi-final in 1998 and lost to Brazil in a penalty shootout after one of the ball twins, they had Ronald and Frank, one of them missed a penalty in that shootout. Then after, they also failed at the Euros in 2000. And then there's a litany, there's a history of the Dutch getting very close and never getting over the hump. But for this generation, the most famous is them getting to the World Cup final in 2010. And they took Spain to extra time and still lost to that Iniesta goal. A goal that I only remember for the sumptuous pass played by Cesc Fabregas in the build-up. And after Fabregas played the pass, I was up in the air because he's one of my favorite players. I've already stated that. Not even I support the Spanish team, but I love Fabregas so much. So that is the history of what the Dutch team are. This is not the most talented of the Dutch sides. We've seen Dutch sides with exceptional talent, like I've mentioned. When you think about Johan Cruyff and think about Marco van Basten, and you think about Dennis Bergkamp, they've had players that would fit and start in any team across the world. This Dutch side does not have the same kind of quality, especially in an attacking sense. But they could be a lot more balanced than some of the Dutch sides we've watched in the past. You've mentioned Virgil van Dijk and Nathan Ake. There's also the Tottenham defender, the left-footed guy, Mickey van der Veen. Then you think about Frenkie de Jong and his ability to control the game in midfield. They might be short up front. They are missing Xavi Simons, who got injured towards the end of the season at Tottenham. And you have a Cody Gakpo who has not had a great season at Liverpool. But whenever he dons that orange, he's a totally different player from what Liverpool have seen in the past season. So maybe there's a lot more balance about that side. And then the expectations of them are extremely low. That no one thinks they'll go very far, they'll do anything at this World Cup. And that should be motivation for them to go out there and prove a point. You also have Denzel Dumfries. I didn't even mention the right back. He's been very good at Inter Milan whenever they play that back three and is the wing back. But the expectations of them are extremely low. People even forget that they were only knocked out by the eventual champions Argentina in 2022 via a penalty shootout. So they were very, very competitive in that World Cup in Qatar. But no one expects the Dutch to do very well in this tournament. So they've got to go there and prove a point. I think for me, they've got to go there and prove a point.
Okay. Do you think Mexico, Canada and the US are prepared to host?
They wouldn't fail with all the things off the pitch. However, I've seen a video, I don't know whether it's true, of where the Japanese side had gone to train in Mexico and looked every bit like, forgive the pun, Africa. Yeah, the pitch was very, very bad where they had gone to do their pre-tournament training. I bet FIFA have sorted that out. If the video was fake or even if it was, they would have taken them to a better place already. Of the three hosts, Canada have what they regard as a golden generation. They have a striker in Jonathan David, who is playing at Juventus. Even if the numbers are not there, but still the kind of quality he's been able to produce, and is Canadian, that would be a bonus. You have Alphonso Davies, the Bayern Munich left back, who has a lot of freedom to get in the forward areas when he's playing for that national side. Beyond that, not much else. However, they regard this as their golden generation, and they'll have a lot of home support to go with that. We should give them something extra if they are going to go far in the tournament. They have, then you have the USA. They've had better teams for me, but they've never had a coach as good as Mauricio Pochettino. In terms of the ability to harness the team ethic and bring teams together, I think he's on a totally different level from anything the US have experienced. Unfortunately for them, their best player, Christian Pulisic, who has been playing, who plays at AC Milan, if this World Cup came 1 year ago, Pulisic would have been arguably one of the best 10 players to come out of this tournament. He hasn't had a great season at Milan. Down, part of it is injury. The other segment is down to loss of form. And I would have loved that Christian Pulisic would have come in the tournament firing on all cylinders. But their Pochettino has put together quite a decent team. In the games that we've watched, they haven't looked too bad, neither have they looked too good. Their most recent friend, I think they lost to Germany by 2-1. And that's the kind of result you have to take into the tournament. But they'll be heavily backed. Those stands will be bouncing with their white, green, and rather white, blue, and red. And that should be some kind of extra push to the side. Then the final host is Mexico. One of the few countries that have hosted the World Cup on multiple occasions that are not necessarily first world, because they hosted the 1986 edition that was won by Argentina. This is not one of their better teams. And we've seen when they had, in the mid-2000s, when they had Rafael Marquez, you had the old man Blanco, the number 9. He had played the World Cup, I think, since 1994. And he had been, I think he played in 5 eventually. So did Marquez. And the guys who are playing in their 6th are just trying to break that record, or players who have been to 5. That is Ronaldo and Messi. And a few of the others. This Mexican team does not inspire a lot of confidence, besides being the home side. And at the weekend, I was watching news, and there was a protest against social injustice, in Mexico, because I think the government has spent too much on the World Cup and forgotten about social causes like healthcare, like access to water. I was thinking, okay, this is not for a World Cup team, but anyway, this is not one of their better sides. I'm not very confident. If you ask me of the 3 hosts, who is likely to go the farthest, I would have USA 1, Canada 2, and Mexico 3.
In spite of home advantage.
Yeah, in spite of that home advantage.
Other than Shakira and the Ghetto Kids, what other highlights are you looking forward to?
One of the things I like about the World Cup is that even people who do not care about football, who do not care about sport, pay attention when it comes around.
Can I
and
tell
that
you
always
something?
warms my heart a lot of the time.
When I was in primary school, people actually used to buy TVs for World Cup.
Exactly. In 1994, my late dad, Haji Muzamiru Mena, who taught me a lot of things, kind of stories that he told about life when he was growing up and when we were raised. He bought his first color television in time for the 1994 World Cup, so I know what you're talking about. Because we used to have a black and white television while we watched Euro 92, and by then I did not interpret the game as well as I can interpret it now, when Denmark beat Netherlands in that Euro final back in 92. But we had our first color television before the 94 World Cup, just in time for kickoff, and in time, of course, to watch Roberto Baggio miss that penalty for Brazil to win the World Cup. And at that time, I was supporting Italy in that World Cup final. I didn't even know why I was supporting them. But I had just chosen the team with longer hair. With longer hair at that stage. So one of the most exciting things for me is that when the World Cup comes around, the excitement and the people who follow is very huge. It's unusual for sport. I was looking at, and being the USA, just for example, recently the NBA finals, the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks, game one was watched by 17 million people on television across platforms. Now imagine the numbers that FIFA have released from the previous World Cup. The World Cup in Qatar was watched by 1.5 billion people. Yeah, online. That means if the world is 7 billion, a quarter of the world watched the World Cup, at least had some kind of engagement on television, on social media. And these days, technology has made it easy to track through Google, through pay TV and all these other kind of platforms. There was 1.5. So to imagine the numbers just that go out and watch. Then, of course, like you mentioned, on Thursday, I'll be very early to ensure that I'm there to watch Shakira. Most especially, how old is she now?
I think she's 50 or late 40s.
Yeah, because I was looking at her and thinking, this is how Mabel will look at 50. And Mabel is not yet 50, yeah? I was amazed. I know during the US presidential campaign, I saw Oprah Winfrey come for one of the rallies of Kamala Harris. And then they mentioned that she was 70. I was like, woo! She looks this good at 70. How will you confirm, Shakira?
My AI tool is thinking.
Yeah.
She's 49. She's 49.
Woo-hoo!
She looks good.
And she still has a waist at 49.
After 2 kids.
Only 2?
She has 2.
Only.
With
And I'm
that,
thinking only 2.
Piqué,
yeah. The former Barcelona and Spanish defender. So I'm really looking forward to that more than Burna Boy. Eh? And you can look forward to Burna Boy, Mebo. I have no issues with you, but I'm looking forward to watching Shakira. And a lot of anything, the US has a very good way of making everything entertaining. That's why their sport, for example, in basketball, something is happening every 24 seconds. Their sport is built around the ultimate entertainment. In 1994, one of the newspapers in Chicago, should have been the Chicago Sun, wrote an article about the World Cup final and sounded very derogatory. He said in that article, the writer said that they had found the reason why football fans across the world are very violent. Remember, around that time, if you go to the 80s and the early 90s, stadiums in Europe across the world had a lot of violence. Even in Uganda, games between Villa and Express, violence was a bare minimum of the games. And I remember telling a story of one of the games I attended back in 1991, I think, between Villa and Express in Masaka, that also ended up with a bit of violence, and I ended up running out of the stadium and hiding under a car, yeah, just to save myself. And I was a kid at the time, very, very young. So this US writer, having watched the World Cup final between Italy and Brazil, here is how he told the story of how bad football was. He said, I now understand why football fans are violence. You cannot sit there for 2 hours or even longer and nothing happens in a game. Then the game ends 0-0. Then you have to live through the tension or people walking 50 meters to take a kick that they then miss. What do you do in the aftermath of that?
So now you box who?
You box someone, you box an opponent. He said he had discovered, and he was just, I think he emphasized how boring football was in comparison to American sport, yeah? If you imagine this, okay, the NFL has a lot of stoppages, but they find it very entertaining. And when you look at basketball, which is for me the most entertaining American sport, every 24 seconds there's something happening. Or you add ice hockey, there's always something happening. Now, I think after 32 years since that article written in the Chicago Sun in 1994, America has found a lot more things to learn and love and understand about football, or soccer, like they will call it, than they did 32 years ago. And I'm looking forward to what exactly America is going to do around the game. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of good things, I think, for me in terms of entertainment, including, of course, on July 19th for that halftime show at the World Cup final. It's unmissable. It's unmissable.
Okay, I hope they get the timing correct. But let's move on. Still on football, but keeping it here at Vipers. Even though this coach delivered the Uganda Premier League trophy, he has been sacked.
And I will start with, even when Vipers win the league trophy, the first person is the club president, Lawrence Mulindo. Because we all know some of the things that have helped Vipers win are down to his investment.
His intervention and not interference.
When he intervenes and does not interfere with what is happening with the team. And he's also always stated that the reason why he's always involved with what the coaches are doing is that even when you buy tomatoes and onions and send them to the kitchen, it's never wrong to peep in the kitchen and see what they are cooking and how close they are to serving the meal and how good the meal is eventually. So normally it's that, but I don't think this one has been sacked or he's left the club because there was interference or intervention from Lawrence Mulindo. While Vipers won the league, and they've won 8 league titles, this was their 8th. They've won 7 before he walked into that job. I don't think they played well. I don't think there was an improvement because Ivan Minnaert was in charge. You cannot put a hand or put an eye on something that Vipers did well this season that was down to the excellence of the person who was in the dugout. I do not sense that. They were also knocked out in the Champions League, which is something that Lawrence Mulindo craves. He wants them to get to the group stages of the Champions League. They have not been able to achieve that. They've done it once in the past under Robertinho, the Brazilian. There is nothing.
The Uganda Cup, that's a
they
small
were
thing.
They've done a double with Alexis Sabiri before. They've won the Uganda Cup before without having to hire someone whose paycheck is in dollars and not shillings. So I think Lawrence Mulindo sits down with his management and they cannot find a major improvement
He has made
to the club or to the players that you can quote them to give him a longer spell in charge of a side. And it felt inevitable. For most of us who have been around the game and around Vipers, I can state on this show without fear of contradiction that I've known for about 5 months that Ivan Minnaert would leave the job at the end of the season. Yeah? But the person who told me in confidence that do not mention it until he's gone. But the frustration has been brewing over a period of time. So in the end, when they choose to let him go, I'm not one of those who is very surprised. And he's looked, in some phases, he's looked very lonely. He has not created a rapport either with the players or with the management. He's not someone that is left and you have to ask questions of Lawrence Mulindo that why do you sack someone who is one? No one is going to miss him at Chitende.
Well, at least he's going to go with fat pockets. But I guess sometimes, that can also maybe put the smile back on his face.
Mulindo has a reputation. Few have left his club and come back and said he owed them money. There's only been one who went, I think, to FIFA. And eventually FIFA had to arm twist Vipers to pay them close to 300 million shillings for their termination, for wrongful termination of their contract. But Minnaert, in a football sense,
no,
not a miss.
Oh, okay. Isma, there's some sad news here in Uganda regarding rugby player Sydney Gongodyo. Do you want to tell us about it? I mean, it's all over the news. He was, I think, in the wrong place at the wrong time.
The police investigation will eventually tell us what exactly happened. There's three people that have been arrested in relation to that mob justice that happened in the vicinity of Ntinda Bukoto, whichever you call it, where the Pirates and Rugby Cranes back row player Sydney Gongodyo was murdered by a mob on Friday afternoon. And all of us, I think, by now have had a chance to watch the video, some of them graphic, when he's getting beaten and loses consciousness, and then he's hit by a piece of wood.
It's like a pole.
Yeah.
It's so huge.
A piece of wood, then is rushed to Mulago and could only live a few hours later, and then eventually passed on in the evening of Friday, June 5th. That should be, Friday, June 5th. Very unfortunate, very, very unfortunate incident. A reminder, first of all, death is a thief. None of us knows when it's going to happen. As someone who watches rugby, I've watched Sydney Gongodyo grow into one of the best players, the ones that we call the Beast. And a few years ago, I think, was named most valuable player of the league, scored the highest number of tries. He was a beast on the rugby pitch. He's one you wanted to have on your team and not on any other side. The circumstances of his death, I think, are the most troubling because initially the story we got was that it was a traffic incident, that he had knocked someone. Eventually that was false, that he had knocked someone, then the border writers lynched him in revenge. Then the story that all of us have heard now is that he had stolen a woman's handbag, and then he was beaten in mob action. Then the other story is that someone stole a handbag and Sydney was in the vicinity, and the person who stole the handbag had jumped onto a bike and left, and then Sydney was assumed to be Omubi. And when the noise starts normally in our communities, most of us do not have the intelligence to give it a thought whether this person is innocent
or even ask where is the bag
or something. So then he was beaten. Then in the video you hear a woman saying Ruachabba, something like that. Then he's beaten. So very, very unfortunate. I've had the chance to listen to his mother and his father at the funeral that was at Kings Park Arena, where Pirates play their games, is club side. And it's a very harrowing tale. And one of the things his father insisted, because Sydney went to Namilyango and then studied in Indeje and went to King's College Budo for his A-level, and he's been a student at Makerere. And initially there had been a story about that he had a history of burglary or something, and some people had even sold it online that he had been expelled from Ndeje over that. Then when his father came at the funeral, he actually stated that he had actually been expelled because he was caught talking to a girl at Ndeje, and he laughed loudly about it as he left the school. The headmaster at the time is someone...
They expelled for that?
Yes, they suspended, or was suspended and told that he wouldn't be able to sit his senior 4 exams in Ndeje. Then his father went and spoke to the headmaster, who I've mentioned on this show before, Dr. Charles Kahijiriza, who is the elder brother of Patrick Kanyomozi. You sports people would know him. And he's someone I know for a very long time. I've known him for 30 years plus. Dr. Charles Kahijiriza is a very amiable gentleman. He's now the University Secretary of Ndeje University after retiring from his headmaster role at Ndeje when he closed 60 at Ndeje SS. Ndeje University took him on as University Secretary. He's an exceptional man, an exceptional person. His father said when they went and negotiated with Dr. Charles Kahijiriza, he was allowed to return to Ndeje to do exams. In senior for the time, yes, those schools are very serious. Maybe when you're being hit on in high school.
I was in Nabisunsa for O and A level.
So when you're being hit on, you'd leave the school. I promise you that. That coupling, like we used to call it. But the same people who used to beat us for coupling now ask us to couple. Yeah, times have changed. Yeah, they beg you to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. When you get Oleno, everything has its own time. So his father told that story. That's the reason why he had been asked to leave Ndeje. But it's a very, very unfortunate incident. For many, Sydney Gongodyo is just a statistic. Yeah, it's just another of the 700 or so. There's a story in the Daily Monitor about the number of people who lose their lives due to mob justice in a year. They keep on fluctuating. There's a time when they were on the rise between 2013 and 2019. Then there's a time when they've been in a bit of a decline. I don't know that it's down to education, whether people in community, there's a lot of civic education that tells people that when you have a criminal, maybe take him to the police.
Yeah.
Of course, sometimes the frustrations, you've also got to look at the causes. The frustrations why people choose mob justice is that the judicial system here is very slow. Yeah? That's also very possible to take someone you saw commit a crime and the police cannot find evidence and release that person. So many times the frustrations of that, and I'm not even trying to justify the death of Gongodyo because very, very I can imagine the pain. I watched his mom and his father, and also watched a video of his sister. She's called Precious. She's in senior 4 in Nabisonsa. And I don't even know how they are going to live with that. Yeah? I don't know how they are going to live with that. With losing one of the people in their family who had done very well, and even his wife, yeah, because he had a child, I think, who is 1 year old. It's unimaginable, the kind of pain that they are going to endure, and we cannot even say enough to feel sorry for them. But also this past week, Mabel, there was also the passing of a former player in the women's division who played for She Corporate, Sisi Nantongo. You might be hearing the name for the very first time. But a few years ago, She Corporate won the FIFA Women's Super League, and Sisi Nantongo was the captain. She stayed with the team. Then they got relegated, went down. Then they played their way back up. This season they were competing and got to the final of the season with a chance of winning the league. Eventually lost the league title to Kawempe Muslim. We mentioned that title race on this show in one of our previous episodes. But over the past few years, Sisi Nantongo had gone very quiet. And reports suggest she had cancer. So when I think when she got the diagnosis, she lost a bit of hope of living and eventually passed on not too long ago. Sport has also been healing or fighting with the pain of losing the young girl Maxine Anyango, the 18-year-old, who was a student at St. Noah, somewhere on Entebbe Road, played basketball for under 18 for Uganda and was the MVP when Uganda qualified for the FIBA AfroBasket Championship. At her level, she died before she was due for surgery on her knee.
Yeah.
Then the anesthesia process did not go well and she passed on in that phase. I remember I also mentioned here that recently there was also a passing of a brother to one of the Cubs players, Rasula Abiriga's brother, also did pass on. His was even very scary. Suffered stroke on a Saturday evening and never recovered. And was young, so very scary. But this one of Sydney Gongodyo, no illness, nothing, and then is beaten with sticks and logs, and he loses a life very tragically. May Sydney's soul rest in eternal peace. Did very well in a very short spell, because I remember watching him when he made his debut for Uganda in 2023. And all of us knew we had found a player and a half. The right attitude for the game, immense discipline for the game, immense dedication. And you could almost tell the pain of people who lived with him. Because for me, I knew him from the rugby, and I didn't know him personally. There are players, if I came here to mention and speak about them, I know them beyond the flank. You've watched me before give a tribute for Robert Seguya when he passed on, the former Heathens and Rugby Cranes player, arguably the greatest rugby player Uganda has produced. I did not know Sydney Gongodyo besides the pitch, but from what I saw within the four lines, is the guy you wanted on your team, you wanted on your side. I saw his coach Marvin Odongo break down as he spoke about the person that Sydney Gongodyo was besides the rugby. Because I largely knew only the rugby about him, I did not get involved with his other life off a pitch. But may his soul rest in eternal peace, and hopefully there is some kind of justice. Even if for a family there is never justice, because no justice can bring back Gongodyo from Mbale, where he's being buried.
Sironko or something?
Sironko, Budadiri. Okay, it used to be Mbale before this mutilation of districts happened.
We call it mutilation.
Yeah, it's mutilation. What else could it be? So may his soul rest in eternal peace. But hopefully the family gets some measure of justice for their child.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about FUFA now and the Wakiso Giants.
It's actually largely the FIFA Big League,
Yeah.
which was concluded over the weekend, and we now know the 4 teams that got promoted. Chigezi Homeboys, we have a team to support, Mabel and I, from the Chigezi sub-region.
Even now.
Yeah. We also have Ntugasaze, who also threw then Blacks Power from Lira, and then we got Kataka from Ombale also qualify. And I got to learn that Kataka have been trying to qualify for the Uganda Premier League for the past 22 years. And that story is very heartwarming. They eventually beat Bright Stars to qualify. But their story was a bit covered by another involving Wakiso Giants, who went through their social media channel and announced that the club is done. Not done in the sense that they were relegated, because they were relegated from FIFA Big League. A few years ago, they were playing in the top tier in the Uganda Premier League. And competing fairly well, got the people in that Wakiso area to watch them and support the club. But some of their games played at that Wakisha ground. But now the club is closing for good. Their chairman, Musa Tagenda, like he's called, but we call him Musa Sebulime, was in Chibuli SS, younger than I was, who has been in charge of the club, and all the other people around him, saying they've closed the club and anyone who wants can take. They are giving their license as they're going to play in the FIFA Regional League next season, but they're saying for them they are done with the game. And
So someone can buy it if they have money?
They didn't indicate that they are selling. They are giving away the club if you want to get involved in the football. And Musa Tagenda, in a litany or a tirade of social media posts, he spoke about the challenges and the struggle and investment in the game that does not give back. And Ugandan football doesn't, at this point, hasn't yet garnered the resources to be able to make it profitable. I mentioned many other things. And of course, he has a bit of blame on FIFA, and he thinks FIFA have been fighting them to ensure that Wakiso Giants get relegated, which is just an accusation, one of the wild ones. And Musa Tagenda, knowing him from high school, he could make many of those. It's a very unfortunate incident, because while we come here and discuss a lot of the flimsy issues around football, refereeing decision here, some smaller things, I'm always preoccupied about the sustainability of clubs. I've always been one of those, for my little time or a lot of time around sport. I'm always preoccupied by that, because Wakiso Giants isn't the first team that I've seen fold. And I fear for so many others that will. I don't know whether Bright Stars will be here for much longer. From the top tier now back in the regional league, where they were many years ago and have gone up and now they've gone back down. You look at Fire Masters, I think every one of us go to the comment section and mention a club that you know that was here in Ugandan football and folded. There's so many of them. Wakiso Giants could make the news on X. I think Mbale Heroes will struggle to be here in a few years. Once a top side in the Uganda Premier League went to the FIFA Big League and have now been demoted. I've also been relegated to the regional league. All of us in our vicinities have Iganga Town Council, for example. I don't know whether Boroboro Tigers still exists. Or Rockstar in Rockstar FC in Tororo. I could go on Horizon in Mbarara when Charles Muhanji was here. And once he lost interest in the game and he's since passed on, the club ceased to exist. And there's so many stories. That's why I've always thought that one of the debates we need to have consistently as people involved with sport is sustainability. The other day we were discussing Black Pearls in rugby. The women's league. They won 4 league titles in a row, and they could not even afford a Rolex for players to go for training, and they eventually decided to fold. So I always remind people around the game that we discuss a lot of trivial issues around the game of football. We discuss personalities, we discuss a referee we do not like, but the lifeblood of sport is those clubs. And to see that every now and then we'll have to discuss a club that is facing the same issue like Wakiso, And this is across all sports disciplines in Uganda. Clubs come around and then cease to exist. And it's going to go on for some time until we have sustainable models that enable these clubs to generate some kind of money to keep those who are investing in them interested and to retain the players who are involved in sport interested in playing.
Let's talk now about the French Open 2026, which was left wide open thanks to the big wigs all dropping out and some injured. What a game. Let's start with we can start with the women, but yeah, we had mentioned Amriva. Is that her name?
Yeah, Maya Andreeva.
Andreeva, yeah.
19-year-old? She's 19, but she's only fulfilling the kind of expectation the world of tennis has had of her. When she first broke through in 2023, I think at the WTA event in Madrid, she was 16. And every review you watched, everyone said, this girl is going to be something. And she was only 16 at the time. So there's been a lot of promise around her, and everyone has been expecting that one day she'll win a Grand Slam. I think it's come 2 years early for her, because the timeline normally is 21, but tennis has delivered Martina Hingis winning the US Open at 16, and it's also delivered a Monica Seles winning the French Open in 1992, and by then Monica Seles I think was 18 before she turned 19. Of course, Monica Seles, sometimes when I reference her career, I imagine she should have won a lot more Grand Slam titles. She won 9 in the end, but remember she was also stabbed by a fan of Steffi Graf, who thought Monica Seles was beating her player. So she came out of the stands, and a fan came out of the stands and stabbed her in the shoulder. And she struggled to return from that. But she's a reference point. That's why this girl, Andreeva, is the youngest player since Monica Seles in 92 to win a Grand Slam title at Roland Garros. And in the end, it was easier than most of us expected, because the Polish qualifier, Chwalinska, had warmed many hearts over the past 2 weeks, including that story that she had not carried enough money for her to last in a hotel through the tournament. And after 2 games, her hotel bill was shooting out of the roof. And not because she was paying 10 million a night. It wasn't like she was paying too much. Then eventually a Polish company came to her rescue and paid her bills to get her to the final. And it was a very good story that a World 114 got to a Grand Slam final. Unfortunately, she did not win, because eventually the tennis god smiled on someone where they've been smiling since she was much younger. And everyone has been expecting Maya Andreeva to win a Grand Slam title, and eventually she delivered on that.
Let's talk about the men. And Zverev, was he lucky to win? Because I watched it, and Capoli, is that his name? Sorry. Koboli.
Flavio Koboli.
Almost got in.
Zverev has been a player with a lot of promise. His first Grand Slam title is coming at the age of 29. But remember, this is a player who has suffered through the golden era. He's played against Roger Federer. He's played against Djokovic. He's played against Nadal. Then, when he thought those players are in decline, and he had a chance to win a Grand Slam title, he goes and plays 3 finals and loses all 3. Among them, I think the most disappointing was the one he lost to Dominic Thiem, at the time. Then you transit from that era, then he walks into another era where there's Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner as exceptional players. Then they too start beating him. So clearly, his era is gone. So when he gets into this final, and I've been rooting for him, I've badly wanted him to win. For so many of the years, and a few years ago when he won the ATP finals, where the top 8 players at the end of the year are going to their own tournament, I thought that is what he needed at the time to break that curse. And even this final, I started to fear that Alexander Zverev was a bit like an Arsenal. You're the one who is referenced as Arsenal and getting very close. Bottling. because it takes a first set. He was in a rush. I remember when watching the game, we have our forum. There is a lot of people in there. Alex Otto, Mark Sally, and a few other people, Mark Namanya. So we're having a conversation. So I posted something that Alexander Zverev is in such a rush to win his first Grand Slam title because he had taken the first set by 6-1. Yeah. Then, of course, the response was, I remember Mark Sally was the first one to respond and say, the second set will determine whether he's actually in a rush. Then he got beat. Then I started to think, okay, this guy is not all that. Then he wins the third, loses the fourth, and then took Koboli to the cleaners in the fifth to deliver on that promise. I was so pleased for him, the German, that he eventually delivered on that Grand Slam title. Now he got that monkey off his back. You can no longer claim the best player never to win a Grand Slam. That title moves to someone else. At least the ones in golf will never get rid of them. There is Colin Montgomery, there is Lee Westwood, there is Ian Poulter, who have never won Grand Slam titles. There is Ricky Fowler. There are several of them who have never won. And Zverev has been the lone bearer of that title in Grand Slam tennis because he was by far the best player never to win a Grand Slam. And that's gone. That's gone. He's delivered on it. And perhaps sometimes you need Lady Luck to smile on you. He needed Djokovic not to be there. He needed the other two big boys to have retired.
And Sinner.
He needed, first of all, Federer and Nadal to retire. Then he also needed Alcaraz and Sinner to get knocked out. And the moment he got in the second week and the other two big, thick, Alcaraz was not here and Sinner had been knocked out, it was his Grand Slam title to lose. And had he not won, then his middle name would have been Butler, Alexander Butler Zverev. He's no longer called that.
Okay, and as we conclude, why should we take note of volleyball and the African National Championship?
There's been a Confederation of Africa Volleyball Zone 5 Nations Champion that has been happening right here in Lugogo, where the two Ugandan sides were playing, the men and the women. Eventually, only the women won, because there was one ticket to win, won a ticket to the Africa Nations Championship, which is a bit like an Africa Cup. And that will be happening in Nairobi. So the national women's team will be part of that. Unfortunately for the men, they lost one game, but that game was fatal because they lost to Kenya. So they will not be going to that championship that will be played in Ivory Coast. I was mightily interested in seeing the team play. I mean the national team for the men and women, because we do not play many tournaments. They have not played one, I think. The boys have not played one since 2023 or even longer than that, when they were in Kigali for a tournament of this magnitude. So they've not qualified, but the girls have. So the Uganda Volleyball Federation, I think, need to ensure that this is a bit more regular, because these boys and girls have to wait 3 to 5 years for just one opportunity to compete outside of the confines of their club sides, outside of Lugogo and Okla Arena in Old Kampala and all these other venues. It's got to be a bare minimum for the federation to ensure that these teams are competing on a regular basis.
Okay. Well, we've come to the end of the show. Remember, World Cup is here. It's upon us. 104 games that you can watch on GoTV and DSTV. Do let us know in the comments which teams you are supporting and why. Do you agree with Isma's second take? Maybe you have a third take at home. If you're supporting countries like from Asia that we haven't really spoken about.
Yeah.
We've spoken anyway briefly about Japan and New Zealand. That is coached by an Englishman. I didn't know that. Yeah, but would love to hear from you. Go get yourself a decoder. Go get yourself whatever it is you need from DSTV to watch the World Cup. We shall see you later on. Bye-bye.
Are you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Nabingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College Nabingo Road. GMS Nabingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.